The alarms screamed inside the broken starcruiser as the hull tore apart in the silence of space. Captain Jace Renner, the last human on board, gritted his teeth and slammed his palm against the emergency seal control. The ship groaned but obeyed, locking down the torn corridor just in time. He didn't have long. The oxygen was already thin, and they were trapped deep inside enemy space with no rescue in sight. The rebel leader, Vena, lay half-conscious on the floor, her armored body covered in plasma burns. Her breathing was weak, her alien physiology struggling in the low oxygen environment. Jace knelt beside her, pulled off his mask, and fixed it over her face without hesitation. She tried to protest, but her voice was barely a whisper as her golden eyes stared at him in disbelief. "You're going to die if you do that," she said, her words shaky. Jace smiled, though his vision was starting to blur. "Not today," he replied, then dragged her toward the inner chamber of the ship, where the atmosphere might still be stable. Every step was a battle, but he refused to fall. Just hours ago, they were enemies. The human fleet had entered the Zarkari system expecting peace. Talks, but it was a trap. The Alliance Council had betrayed Earth, selling them out to the highest bidder. Vena, once the most feared rebel commander, had turned on her own government when she realized the truth. Jace had saved her from execution, blasting through prison walls and carrying her through a war zone. His orders were simple: extract the rebel leader if she was willing to switch sides. What he didn't expect was her to risk her life covering his retreat when the entire planet turned against them. Now they were both alone, hunted by Zarkari warships and forgotten by the traitorous human officials who started the false alliance. The ship they had stolen was damaged during escape, crashing into a derelict mining station hidden inside a nebula. It was a tomb of metal and dust, but it was their only shelter. As Jace laid Vena on the cold floor, he tapped into the ship's failing systems. The internal oxygen reserves showed just 30 minutes left. Power was flickering. Communication systems were fried. The enemy would find them soon. He had only one choice: to find the life support control buried somewhere in the ruins. Vena grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so injured. "You should leave me," she said. "If they find you with me, they'll kill you." Jace looked at her with fire in his eyes. "If they find me without you, I'm already dead," he replied with no hesitation. He moved quickly, slipping through torn corridors and twisted bulkheads. Every breath burned his lungs, and every second wasted brought death closer. The enemy wasn't the only threat. The mining station itself was unstable, with collapsing supports and old automated defenses activating in error. Jace ducked under a low beam and forced open a sealed door. Behind it was the station's old control room, its screens dark, its systems forgotten by time. He pulled open the access panel, working fast with tools he barely understood. He was a soldier, not an engineer, but he had no other choice. Flashes of light filled the corridor as Zarkari scouts breached the outer hull. They were here. Jace worked faster, rerouting power manually, fingers bleeding on rusted metal. A burst of pressure hit the chamber. The oxygen was returning. The life support had restarted, just barely enough to keep them alive, but he didn't have time to rest. The enemy was already inside. He sprinted back to Vena's location, heart pounding like a war drum. When he reached her, she was already sitting up, mask removed, breathing deeper. She looked at him like she was seeing something she couldn't understand. "You gave up your air," she said. "Why?" Jace didn't answer. He raised his weapon and aimed it at the approaching footsteps echoing down the hall. "Because you're still worth saving," he muttered as the first shadow appeared in the doorway. The Zarkari scout stepped into the dim hallway, its plasma rifle raised and scanning. Its armor shimmered with faint blue light, designed to absorb heat signatures. It didn't see Jace behind the fallen beam to its left. The human waited for the right angle, counting each breath as he lined up his shot. His pulse was steady. Years of war had trained him to remain calm even when surrounded. He squeezed the trigger, and the shot struck the scout in the throat joint where armor plates met. The alien dropped with a heavy thud, its weapon clattering across the metal floor. Jace rushed to retrieve it. The Zarkari rifle was heavier than it looked, but still operational. He turned just in time to see another shadow enter behind the first. This one was faster, ducking and rolling toward cover before he could aim. The firefight had truly begun. He threw himself behind a bulkhead as shots flew past. Sparks danced across the corridor, lighting up the narrow space with violent flashes. He rolled across to a new position and fired again. This time, the shot caught the second scout's leg, and it stumbled into a support beam before collapsing. Silence returned, but only for a moment. He knew there were more coming. He had to move Vena to a safer spot. He hurried back to her, crouching beside her armored form. She was stronger now, her breathing steady and her voice firmer than before. "You should have left," she said. "You can't win against them alone." Jace ignored the words and lifted her carefully. "Then we fight together," he answered as he helped her stand. She leaned on him as they moved deeper into the ship's maintenance tunnels. The old mining station's layout was a twisted maze of metal and forgotten machinery. Every turn could lead to safety or to death. They passed broken mining drones and collapsed beams. Jace listened for movement behind them, his ears trained to catch the faintest sound of pursuit. Suddenly, the ceiling above gave way, and a mechanical claw swung down, grabbing Jace by the shoulder. It was one of the station's long-dead security systems, now awoken by faulty power. He grunted in pain as metal dug into his armor, trying to crush his bones. Vena reacted instantly. With a cry, she drove her energy blade into the joint of the claw. Sparks flew, and the machine hissed before releasing him. He dropped to the floor, rolling away and coughing. She pulled him up with surprising strength for someone recently unconscious. "We're even now," she said with a faint smirk. He nodded, gripping her arm. "Not yet," he replied. "You still owe me dinner." It was a joke, but her smile lingered for a second longer than it needed to. Then the wall shook again with another incoming blast. They reached an old control room at the station center. The air was breathable. A broken console still displayed some data. Jace used it to scan for exits. There was one path still unsealed, leading to an old mining elevator. If they could get there, they might escape through the surface vent, but the path would take them past the reactor core. That area had been damaged during the crash, and the heat signatures there were unstable. Still, they had no choice. The sound of approaching troops made the decision for them. Jace grabbed 2 recharged energy cells from the locker and handed one to Vena. "Can you fight?" he asked. She tested her grip on the blade and nodded. "Better than you," she replied. Together, they ran through fire-scarred corridors and past pools of coolant that hissed beneath their boots. They moved like shadows in a place that had forgotten the light. Behind them, the Zarkari forces hunted with no mercy. The rebel leader was considered a traitor now, and the human was just an inconvenience to be erased. But neither Vena nor Jace would fall without a fight. They moved through the station like 2 parts of the same weapon. At the reactor doors, they stopped. Heat poured through the seams, painting the air with shimmering waves. Jace reached for the override and punched in a code. It wasn't supposed to work, but somehow it did. The doors opened with a hiss, revealing the path forward and the danger within. The reactor core glowed with unstable energy, bathing the chamber in a shifting orange hue. Cracks lined the walls, and steam hissed from pressure vents. Jace held his arm up to block the heat, then glanced at Vena. She was already stepping forward, her face set with focus. The bridge across the core was narrow, metal beams held together by old welds. Beneath it, The energy pulses of the reactor pulsed like the heartbeat of a dying beast. One wrong step and they would fall into raw plasma. Jace tested the beam and then led the way. The heat was unbearable. His armor began to overheat, warning. Lights flashing in his visor. Still, he moved carefully, one boot at a time. Vayna followed close behind, her alien skin tougher than his. But even she was breathing heavier now. Halfway across, a tremor shook the bridge. A loose beam fell from above and slammed beside Jace, making him stumble. He caught the support rail and steadied himself. Vayna reached out and helped pull him up. The gap they faced now was wider than before. They couldn't jump it while carrying. Weapons. Jace tossed his plasma rifle to the far side, then looked back at Vayna. She nodded and did the same. With a running start, Jace leapt across, landing hard on his knees but holding the edge. He pulled himself up and turned. Vayna followed. Her jump smooth and balanced. She landed beside him with only a slight skid. Their weapons were retrieved in seconds. The bridge behind them groaned as more beams fell. They didn't look back. Time was running out. The enemy would not be far behind. Beyond the reactor chamber was a maintenance tunnel, cooler and tighter. Pipes lined the walls, some still hissing. From pressure. Jace checked the map on the stolen Zarkari wristpad. The elevator was just ahead, behind a reinforced door that might still respond to access codes. He reached the door and tapped the panel. Denied. He growled and tried another. Sequence. Denied again. Vayna stepped up, her fingers moving faster. Her access worked. The door slid open slowly, revealing the elevator chamber dusty, but still intact. The shaft dropped hundreds of meters through rock and steel. Jace peered over the edge and saw the ancient platform, waiting at the bottom. The control system blinked faintly. It had power, but just barely. If they used it now, they might not get a second chance. Jace and Vayna entered and closed the door behind them. As the elevator rumbled to life, the lights flickered. The cables groaned as if waking from centuries of sleep. The descent was slow. Too slow. Every second felt like it would stretch forever. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the station above. Debris rained into the shaft. Something had triggered a collapse. Jace grabbed the railing as the elevator shook violently. Vayna braced herself as dust filled the air. A large beam snapped loose and crashed just above them. The elevator jolted, but continued to descend. Below them, the vent chamber loomed closer. They were near the old mining surface, a place the Zarkari had sealed long ago after abandoning the station. Jace had read the history during his intel briefings. As the elevator doors opened, they were met with silence. No guards. No drones, just cold tunnels and wind-blown dust. The surface was near, but so was the storm. The nebula outside this rock. World-spawned radiation storms that could kill in minutes. Jace activated the environmental scanner. There was a short window of calm, maybe 10 minutes. If they could reach the outer comms tower, he might send a signal to the human fleet or what was left of it. They had no other option. He looked at Vayna and nodded. They began to move quickly, boots crunching on old gravel and ice. The atmosphere here was thin but breathable. Vayna pulled her scarf over her mouth. Jace adjusted his rebreather. His eyes scanned the dark skies as the towers came into view on the ridge. But then the air shifted. A faint hum buzzed from the cliff above. Zarkari dropships, sleek, black and fast. They had followed the trail. The final hunt had begun. Jace pulled Vayna behind a rock outcrop as the first ship hovered overhead, searchlights cutting through the gloom. Vayna looked at Jace and whispered one word with quiet fire in her voice. "Fight." He gave her a sharp nod. He checked the rifle one last time. The next battle would not be about escape. It would be about survival. And maybe something greater than that. Jace pressed his back against the cold stone as the Zarkari ship hovered above. The sharp whine of its engines vibrated through the ground. Dust swirled around him. He kept his weapon close, and his breathing low, knowing one sound could give them away. Vena crouched beside him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Her ears twitched at the sound of movement above. She motioned with 2 fingers, signaling 2 enemy scouts had dropped down and were heading toward the tower. Jace nodded and moved into position. The enemy was confident, but careless. The first Zarkari scout passed too close to Jace's cover. With a quick movement, Jace grabbed him and pulled him into the shadows. One sharp strike to the helmet knocked him unconscious. No noise, no blood. Just silence. The second scout paused, sensing something was wrong. But Vena was already behind him. Her blade slid under his arm and into the weak joint of his armor. He collapsed silently. She dragged the body out of sight, then gave Jace a look that said they had to move fast. They climbed the slope toward the tower, staying low and using the rocks for cover. The cold air bit at their skin, and the wind howled across the ridge. The tower stood tall at the edge, bent and rusted but still functional. It was the only way to call for help. Jace reached the control panel first. He ripped off the frozen cover and scanned the display. Damaged but working. He connected the wrist pad to the tower, hoping the old human protocols still matched. The screen flickered, then loaded a communications link. The signal was weak. Jace tuned the frequency to Earth Alliance command. Static buzzed. A broken voice came through, asking for identification. He sent his code and repeated the request. Human operative requesting emergency evac. Coordinates transmitting now. The voice on the other side paused, then responded. Signal received. Time to arrival, 20 minutes. Hold position. Jace blinked in disbelief. Someone had actually heard him. There was still a fleet out there. A reason to keep fighting. A reason to survive. Vena stared at him. You did it, she said. Jace didn't smile. He looked toward the sky where more enemy ships were circling. It's not over yet, he replied. We have to hold this tower. If it falls, no one will know where we are. We disappear for good. They reinforced the entrance using broken equipment and stone. Jace placed 2 mines near the base and positioned the fallen scouts' weapons facing the path. Vena climbed up the tower's ladder and took position as a sniper. Her blade rested across her lap. Minutes passed like hours. Then came the storm. The clouds broke open with green lightning flashing across the sky. The winds howled louder, masking the sound of approaching boots. The enemy was coming. Vena whispered through the movement. 5 targets. Jace crouched behind cover, watching as shadows approached. The first Zarkari stepped on the mine. A flash of light and heat swallowed the lower path. 1 down, the rest scattered, firing blindly. Jace took advantage, firing carefully and hitting 2 more. The last 2 enemies climbed the rocks, trying to flank, but Vena's aim was perfect. Her shots hit both targets in the chest. The path was clear again. But they both knew it wouldn't last. More ships circled above. Jace reloaded and checked the timer. 12 minutes remained. The storm was getting worse. If the evac ship didn't come soon, even surviving the enemy wouldn't save them. The air was thinner now. Breathing became harder. The reactor blast had damaged the atmospheric filters. Vena coughed but kept her eyes on the sky. If we fall here, at least it's together, she said softly. Jace looked up at her and nodded. We're not falling. Not today, he said as he checked his gear one last time. Another wave was coming. This one bigger. The ground shook as a larger transport landed just beyond the ridge. Dozens of Zarkari warriors poured out, armed and armored. Jace gripped his rifle tighter. Vena drew her blade. The tower behind them held the signal, the only hope. They stood to protect it. The ground trembled as the heavy transport released more soldiers. The wind carried the sharp screech of Zarkari armor locking into combat positions. Jace took a deep breath and checked the position of the mines he had left behind. He had only one left. Vayna stayed above, crouched low behind the broken tower rail. She adjusted her aim and whispered target counts over the comms. 17, forming 2 squads. One flanking left, the other moving center, she said. Jace understood what that meant. They were trying to split their defense. He moved quickly, grabbing a heavy plasma cannon from the fallen supply crate. It had only 2 charges. He waited until the center squad entered the narrow rock gap. Then he fired. The blast lit the sky and turned the stone to fire. Screams echoed, then silence. The flanking squad didn't stop. They moved faster, reaching the left ridge. Vayna tracked them, one shot at a time. She hit the first clean in the head, the second in the chest, the third made it to cover. Jace sprinted up the path and met him hand to hand. The Zarkarier was taller, stronger, but not faster. Jace ducked a swing and drove his elbow into the alien's throat. It staggered, dropping its weapon. Jace didn't give it time to recover. He picked up a broken pipe and struck until the threat didn't move again. Breathing hard, he scanned the battlefield. Smoke drifted across the slope. The enemy regrouped behind cover. They were trying to surround the tower. He ran back to Vayna's position, climbing halfway to where she held the high ground. Her voice was calm but urgent. "They're deploying something. A signal dampener. It's aimed at the tower," she said. Jace cursed and followed her aim. A small cylindrical device glowed blue on the field. If it activated, the evac ship wouldn't find their signal. He checked his rifle and nodded. "I'll go for it," he said. Vayna grabbed his wrist. "You won't survive out there alone." He looked at her with calm fire in his eyes. "Then cover me better than you ever have." She let go, but her stare stayed locked on him as he descended the slope into open ground. The device was placed in the center of a ridge covered in dead metal and bones. He stayed low, rolling from rock to rock. Shots rained down around him. He didn't stop. He reached the device and slid beside it. The control panel blinked with alien script. He opened the side with his blade and yanked free the main power line. It sparked, sending a shock up his arm. He winced, then crushed the circuit with his elbow plate. The blue glow faded. The dampener died. He turned to run and caught a shot across his shoulder. He fell, rolled, and scrambled to cover. Vayna's blasts from above dropped the shooter. Jace rose, blood dripping, but he kept running. Every step felt heavier, every breath sharper. But the tower still stood. The signal was still alive. And they were not done yet. Back at the top, Vayna met him and helped him into cover. "You're insane," she muttered. He grinned despite the pain. "You picked me," he said. She shook her head, then pressed a healing patch against his wound. It hissed, slowing the bleeding just enough. Then the sky split with thunder. A second transport was landing, larger than the first. Its doors opened, and from within stepped a single figure in golden armor, the Zarkari commander. Vayna froze when she saw him. Jace noticed her silence and asked, "Who is that?" She swallowed hard. "My brother," she said. "He was the one who gave the order to betray Earth. He was the one who tried to execute me." Jace's jaw clenched. He loaded the last charge into his rifle and looked at her. "Then we finish this together." Asterisk. The Zarkari commander stood tall in golden armor that shimmered under the stormlight. His mask retracted slowly, revealing a face carved with cruelty and power. His eyes locked directly on Vayna as he raised his arm to point toward the tower. Jace stayed low beside her, gripping his weapon tightly. "What kind of firepower does your brother carry?" he asked. Vayna didn't answer right away. Her voice dropped to a low tone. He doesn't use just weapons, he controls minds. Half the soldiers you saw were loyal before he broke them. That changed everything. Jace's mind raced. A direct fight would be dangerous, maybe suicidal. But if the commander fell, the rest might scatter. Vayna touched her blade, the one she had refused to let go since the prison. I want to be the one to stop him, she said. Jace nodded. Then I'll clear you a path. Before she could respond, he stood and fired. His shot struck the rock near the Zarkari commander, drawing fire. Enemy troops reacted instantly, sending blasts toward Jace's position. Vayna moved with purpose, staying low and fast. She cut through the first line of soldiers with skill and fury. Her blade spun in wide arcs, leaving trails of light and sparks. Jace backed her from the ridge, picking off targets that tried to flank. The storm roared around them, lightning flashing through the sky. The commander advanced slowly, ignoring the chaos. Vayna charged at him, shouting his name in their native tongue. He stopped and raised a hand. She froze mid-stride, her body locking as if struck by invisible chains. Her blade slipped from her fingers. Jace saw her collapse and broke cover. He didn't care how many guns turned his way. He sprinted across the rocks, dodging fire and leaping. Over bodies, he reached Vayna's side and knelt beside her. Her eyes blinked, unfocused, her limbs shaking from the mental grip. I can't move, she whispered. He's in my mind. Jace looked up at the commander, fury building in his chest. Then I'll break his hold, he said. He rose and aimed his rifle at the golden figure. The commander turned, face calm, and raised his hand to Jace. A wave of pressure hit him, his vision blurred. His knees buckled, but he didn't fall. He forced one step forward, then another. Blood dripped from his nose. His body trembled, but his focus stayed sharp. He pulled the trigger. The shot hit the commander's shoulder. The spell broke. Vayna gasped and rolled aside. Jace collapsed to one knee. The commander growled and threw a shock blast that sent Jace flying backward into a wall. Vayna recovered and snatched her blade. With a scream, she launched herself forward. This time, her brother wasn't ready. Her blade met his armor and sparked. He blocked with his gauntlet and countered, but she twisted mid-air and landed behind him. The next strike cut into the side of his armor. He staggered, clutching his ribs. Jace struggled to stand. Pain screamed through every bone, but he managed to raise his rifle again. He aimed for the same damaged spot. Vayna dodged a final strike and shouted, "Now!" Jace fired. The blast punched into her brother's side, sending him crashing down. The battlefield paused. Zarkari troops stood still, watching their leader fall. Some lowered their weapons. Others dropped to one knee. Whatever control he had was gone. Vayna stood over him, her blade at his throat. But she didn't strike. She looked up at Jace instead. "No more death," she said. "Not like this," Jace nodded. He dropped his rifle and let out a deep breath. The evac signal blinked again. 2 minutes remaining. Vayna turned to the remaining troops. "The war is over. Go home. Live with your own choices now." No one answered, but no one fired. One by one, they stepped back. Some vanished into the mist. Others simply stood still, unsure of what they had become without command. Jace walked slowly to Vayna and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You ended it," he said. The air grew strangely quiet as the Zarkari soldiers slowly pulled back. There was no order, no command, just the silence of uncertainty. Vayna stood tall, her blade now resting at her side. Her brother lay motionless, still breathing but unconscious. She stared down at him with a mix of pain and relief. Jace leaned against a broken support beam, wiping blood from his forehead. The evac signal blinked faster now, a steady rhythm that promised a way out. He looked at Vayna, unsure if she was ready to leave this place behind. Her world had turned against her. Her people had hunted her. And now she had stopped the war herself. She turned to Jace and walked over. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was calm. "He was my only family left," she said. "Even in the end, I hoped he would stop." Jace didn't respond right away. He just looked at her with quiet understanding. Then he spoke, voice steady. "Sometimes family has to be left behind to make a new one." The words stayed in the air between them for a long moment. Then the sound of engines broke through the silence. A sleek Earth Alliance evac ship descended slowly through the storm. Its lights cut through the smoke, scanning the surface. The ramp dropped, and 2 medics rushed out. Jace waved them over. He staggered forward but remained upright. 2 survivors. 1 human, 1 rebel, he said. The medics caught him before he fell. Vena walked behind him, her armor scratched and her skin pale but unshaken. The medics hesitated at first, unsure whether to treat her as a threat. "She's with me," Jay said firmly. "If she doesn't get on this ship, neither do I." The medics looked at each other and then nodded. Both were carried aboard. Inside the evac ship, warmth and clean air replaced the chaos they left behind. The hatch sealed with a hiss. They were finally off that cursed rock. Jace lay on a medical cot, hooked up to oxygen and a stabilizer. Vena sat beside him, her arm wrapped in bandages. They said nothing for a while. The hum of the ship filled the space. Then Jace opened one eye and whispered, "So what happens next?" Vena looked out the window at the stars. "They'll call me a traitor, maybe worse. But I don't care anymore," she said. "I've seen too much. I've lost too much. I just want to help rebuild something better." Jace smiled weakly and replied, "Then we start with 1 step." Together, the ship entered the jump zone. A flicker of light and space bent around them. The nebula vanished behind them. Ahead was Earth territory, home, or what was left of it. The Alliance would have questions. Some wouldn't be happy to see them alive, but Jace didn't care. He had done what he came to do. Vena leaned back against the wall, her eyes finally closing for the first time in days. She didn't know what her future held. She didn't even know if she had one. But in that moment, she was not hunted. She was not hated. She was simply alive. Jace turned his head toward her and watched her sleep. Even scarred, even exhausted, she looked strong. Not just a leader of rebels, but someone who had survived something most never could. He knew this wasn't the end. It was just a pause in a longer story. When the ship docked, the bay doors opened to a waiting team of Alliance officers. Some had weapons drawn, others held scanners and restraints. The captain stepped forward and stared at Vena. "Is that her? The rebel commander?" he asked coldly. Jace stood between them, swaying slightly but holding firm. "She surrendered. Her army saved me, saved all of us. You treat her like an enemy, then I'm your enemy too." The room tensed, hands tightened on triggers, but the captain finally nodded slowly. "Stand down," he ordered. "Bring them in. We'll let command decide what happens next." Jace and Vena exchanged a look. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The chamber was silent, except for the low hum of lights. Jace stood at the far end of the tribunal hall, his uniform clean but wrinkled, his body still healing beneath the surface. Across from him, high-ranking Alliance officials sat behind long desks, faces cold and unreadable. Vena stood beside him, not in chains, not in armor, but in plain gray clothes. Her posture was upright, proud even in the face of judgment. Some in the room still saw her as a threat. Others saw an opportunity. But only a few saw her truth. "You risked lives," one admiral said. "You harbored a known enemy. You disobeyed direct orders." Jace didn't blink. "I saved lives," he replied. "I prevented a war from becoming a massacre." "And she's not the enemy." "Not anymore." The tribunal asked questions for hours. They dug through recordings, reviewed censor Logs, read reports from the medics and the field unit that extracted them. But what stood stronger than any file was the story that both Jace and Vayna told. She had turned against her own brother, the Zachary commander who twisted the war for power. She helped stop the signal disruptor that could have killed them all. She stood between enemy and ally to stop the bloodshed. And she survived it all to stand here now. The head of the tribunal tapped the desk. You both acted beyond your roles. That cannot be ignored. But neither can the results. Earth stands because of your choices. The council will not punish courage dressed in disobedience. Jace exhaled for the first time in hours. Vayna didn't move, but her shoulders loosened. They had survived the battlefield. Now they had survived the politics. But survival wasn't enough. They wanted more than to just breathe. They wanted to build. Weeks passed. News of the Zachary commander's fall spread across sectors. Without his control, the enemy armies fractured. Small groups surrendered. Others vanished into deep space. The war didn't end overnight, but the tide had turned. Peace began to form from scattered pieces. Jace and Vayna were not sent back to the front. Instead, they were assigned to Earth's rebuilding division. Their role was strange. Both military and diplomatic, sometimes hated, sometimes welcomed. But they kept showing up. Together, they visited refugee camps where humans and Zachary children played in the dirt. They delivered supplies to burned colonies where no flag flew. They stood side by side at memorials for the fallen. Neither spoke much during those moments. Words never seemed enough. One night, beneath a sky of artificial stars on a reconstructed station, Jace asked a question. If you could go anywhere now, where would you go? Vayna didn't look away from the stars. She answered softly. Wherever you're going. He smiled, then looked down at the field report in his hand. Another planet needed rebuilding. Another world torn between fear and hope. He folded the paper and handed it to her. Then pack light, he said. We leave tomorrow. Their shuttle landed on a green world with deep scars across its surface. Old war zones marked by craters and wreckage, but people had returned. Homes were rising again. Life, though wounded, was fighting to bloom. Jace stepped onto the soil first and breathed in deeply. Vayna followed. Children stared at her, unsure whether to run or wave. She knelt beside them and smiled. One brave boy reached out and touched her hand. He didn't flinch. She looked at Jace and whispered, "This is what winning feels like." Together, they worked with the rebuilding crews. They shared food with farmers and fixed broken power grids. They dug graves for those who had been forgotten and planted trees where nothing had grown for years. Slowly, they became a symbol of something new, not just survival, not just victory, but unity. And in the center of it all stood a human who never gave up, and a rebel who gave everything to stop the war. Their story was told across systems, passed from world to world. A story not of power, but of choice. A story of how one human still fought even when he was trapped, hunted, and out of air, because saving her was worth everything.